Everyone talks about building nuclear reactors, the cost, the timeline, the safety record, but there's a conversation almost no one is having. What happens when you need to stop one? Because here's the thing, you can't just turn it off. When a nuclear plant reaches the end of its life, it doesn't get demolished like an old factory. You can't send in a wrecking ball. The steel, the concrete, the pipes, after decades of operation, they all can be radioactive. And radioactive waste doesn't care about your budget or your timeline. The process of safely dismantling a reactor is called decommissioning, and on paper it sounds straightforward. Shut it down, clean it up, move on. In reality, it's one of the most complex, expensive, and drawn-out engineering challenges humanity has ever attempted. Here's what most people don't realize. Decommissioning a nuclear reactor can cost hundreds of millions, sometimes over $1 billion per unit. In some cases, total dismantling costs can approach or even exceed the original construction cost, especially for older plants that were built decades ago. And the timeline? Construction might take a decade. Decommissioning can take several decades, sometimes up to 40 or 60 years, depending on the strategy chosen. Not because engineers are inefficient, but because radioactive materials must be carefully managed. In some cases, operators deliberately wait for short-lived isotopes to decay, reducing radiation levels before dismantling begins. You can't rush physics. Today, more than 200 reactors worldwide have been permanently shut down and are in various stages of decommissioning. Some have already been fully completed, meaning the site has been cleared and released for unrestricted use, but many others remain in long-term dismantling programs that span decades. So why is this so difficult? A few reasons. First, radiation. Workers can only operate in higher radiation zones for limited periods before reaching regulatory exposure limits. That forces teams to rotate constantly, use remote tools, and plan every task in detail. Work that might be straightforward in a conventional demolition often takes significantly longer in a nuclear facility. Second, the waste itself. Materials removed from the reactor building must be carefully surveyed, sorted, and classified based on radiation levels. Some can be decontaminated and released for reuse. Others must be packaged and stored as low, intermediate, or high-level radioactive waste. Certain isotopes remain hazardous for hundreds of years and spent nuclear fuel for thousands. While many countries have disposal facilities for low and intermediate level waste, only a few have fully operational long-term repositories for high-level waste. Third, and less often discussed, early nuclear plants were not designed with dismantling in mind to the extent modern reactors are. Decommissioning was always anticipated, but detailed strategies, funding structures, and long-term waste solutions evolved significantly over time. Early programs focused primarily on building and operating the technology safely. The end-of-life phase became more systematically planned in later decades, and future someone else is now us. Today, many countries require nuclear operators to set aside money during a plant's operating life to cover the cost of eventual decommissioning. The system is designed to ensure that taxpayers are not left with the bill, but estimating those costs decades in advance has proven difficult. In several cases, early projections were revised upward as more real-world decommissioning experience became available. In the United Kingdom, the total projected cost of managing and cleaning up its nuclear legacy, including civil power plants, research facilities, and former weapons-related sites, is estimated at well over £130 billion. In the United States, the Department of Energy's Environmental Cleanup Program, largely focused on former weapons production sites, is expected to continue into the late 21st century. This is not a hidden issue. It is a long-term financial and engineering commitment that stretches across generations. While many countries maintain dedicated decommissioning funds, the final costs remain uncertain, and in some cases, funding gaps have required reassessment or additional public support. None of this means nuclear power is a dead end. There are well-documented arguments for extending the life of existing reactors, particularly in the context of energy security and low-carbon electricity. There are also ongoing efforts to develop new reactor designs that incorporate lessons learned, including improved safety systems and, in some cases, design features intended to simplify eventual decommissioning. However, public debates about nuclear energy tend to focus heavily on construction costs, safety, and operational performance. The back end of the life cycle, long-term waste management and decommissioning, receives less visibility outside specialist and regulatory circles. This isn't a political argument. It's a reminder that nuclear energy is not just about building and operating reactors. It is a full life cycle engineering commitment that extends decades beyond the final day of electricity production. We're very good at building things, but we're still figuring out how to responsibly unbuilding them. And with nuclear, the stakes of getting that wrong couldn't be higher. So next time someone tells you nuclear is simple, ask them what happens at the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories about our fascinating world. Alright, that's all for now. Thank you for watching.